Welcome to the Metal Maniacs Podcast. I am your host, Jay Ingersoll, and I'm here today with my co-host,
Mod.
Here as always. Appreciate it. How's it going, Mod?
Good. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, today we have a special guest that is a huge inspiration to me. He's been a good friend for a long time now. We've shared many stages together, and he's the king of tones and heavy riffs. He has played in Ephus, which was always a favorite to play with. He kind of did a stint in If He Dies and a few other projects along the way, and now his guitar riffage is dedicated to his band Tiny Tree. This man also runs his own studio called Analog Time Machine and has recorded such bands as Jesse Ray and the Carolina Catfish, Tongue Cutter, Short Hair Domestics, Funeral Noise, Slug Child, Best Noodles in Town, Funeral Language, and among others. So, and overall, just a good, happy dude. He fucking brings the mood around when you're around him. I'm sure he's had bad days, but I've never seen one. We've hung out plenty of times. I got wine drunk and pissed my pants with him before. So I didn't necessarily piss my pants. I pissed on my pants. I remember, I still pissed my pants, but
hey, you're the host. It's your story.
Yeah. So I mean, that's it.
I forgot about that.
I'm learning new things this morning, too.
So welcome, Addison Eilers. What's up, buddy?
Hey. You know what's funny is when I told Tara where I was going, when we first started dating, we stopped by here for your New Year's Eve party. Because I used to live in the Blue House, over on Shetler, and we stopped by for a quick sec.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, the guy we went to for the New Year's Eve party. I was like, yeah, that's exactly where I'm going.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a while since we hung out because if I'm not mistaken, you moved away for a while, right? Or
Yeah.
Or
So when Tara and I got married in 2010, my buddy Kendall moved to Austin with his wife, and he's like, dude, come down here. And he and I were doing music together. He started playing played bass with me and Vin in Ephus. He played our 2 release shows that we did. And so we followed him down there, and I was like, cool, we can keep making music together. And it was like, we were just trying to get our foothold in our marriage. So it was an opportunity for us to establish ourselves as a couple. And then we moved back. We had my son in 2012, and then we moved back in 2013.
Okay.
And then now we live in Montague.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
And I've seen you here and there out and about. We haven't really got a chance to hang out or anything. So this
I know.
is
I was so pumped. I was like, cool. I get to hang with Jay.
Yeah, it's kind of special to me that we got a chance to actually, rekindle, because I know we're both busy. Shit happens.
Yeah.
So whatever. So, yeah, let's just start at the beginning, bro. What kind of got you into music? I mean, our podcast is called The Metal Maniacs, and it's dedicated to this magazine right here, which is extreme metal. Sick. I know that's not always your forte, the extreme metal, but you've got the riffs and you've been there, and you've worked with a heavy band, so you know enough about it. And but like I said, you're just an overall good dude and an inspiration, and I think people should check out your shit. So tell me how that started, what kind of got you into music, and why did you start playing? Where did that come from,
The way I started playing guitar is the lamest story. I remember when I was in 5th grade, there was a book we had to read where a kid's grandpa was passing on the guitar, and the kid was being taught how to play it by his grandpa. I just thought that was cool. So then we had a J.C. Penney catalog that had, 1 page dedicated to guitars. I was like, yeah, I want a guitar. And I remember my dad telling me, because we didn't have a lot of money growing up, where this guitar was $100. He's just like, oh man. So they bought me this guitar hoping to God I was going to do something with it. And so about 3 months into owning this instrument, I sat down. I was like, all right, dude, you got to learn this. And it came with a little book, and it had 4 songs, 2 2-chord songs and 2 3-chord songs. And I knew Silent Night, so I was like, okay, I'm going to figure this one out. And then it was just over from that point. And I remember when I was a kid, I was like, I'm going to play guitar different than everybody else. And I was like, that definitely stuck because I'm a weirdo.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Never another Silent Night.
Yeah.
After that one, yeah.
Oh, man, yeah. But that got me into it. And then the other major moment that blew my mind was, I remember hearing the song Higher by Creed, and the intro blew me away. I was like 12 years old, and I was like, he's playing a melody and a bass line at the same time, and that just like rocked my world. And I was like, so then Creed was a big one, and then the next major influential band for me was like when I first heard the record Enter by the band Russian Circles. This was like in 2005, 2006, and I was like, holy cow, like that was the what's what I'm looking for, the foundation that like my brother and I were like, that's it.
Okay.
That's it. For like
Yeah.
Ephus, I was like, the way that they structured melodies, the way that they progressed through songs, like that was it. So like so much so, I remember reading an interview with Mike Sullivan, the guitar player of that band, and he's like, yeah, I tuned my guitar to CGC FGC, which is just dadgad drop down a full step. And he's like, it's like an Irish Celtic tuning. He's just like, and so I tune my guitar like that, and I've been in that same tuning since 2006. I was like, which is great for me. I'm actually in B in Tiny Tree to make it a little bit easier for me to sing to.
Yeah.
Just going down that half step really helps.
With your register as far as your
Exactly.
vocal range and shit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just that little bit, because I found when I was in C, I was just pushing just a little bit to the top of my range,
Yep.
which was tougher. But then like with the top two strings being dropped down, I can reach for like melodies a lot easier, to where I can keep a melody going while holding down that low note. So I found that's really helpful. And then I can hit really big chords and make the whole guitar just open it up. So
Yeah, when I saw you guys play, I noticed that in your style too, and I don't know if you were using like the pedal to loop yourself.
No loops actually.
No loops at all.
No,
okay,
yeah.
But I'm because I'm watching you tap dance on all of the pedals.
Oh,
that they have up there.
That's always been one of his specialties.
But I did notice that like you're doing the rhythm, but
Yeah.
you're also like way up top, just doing like all of these little like supersonic lead parts over. And I would never put Tiny Tree in the same sentence as Creed.
Yeah.
But you're right in the styling. You know, some of the Mark Tremonti is to play that drop D tuning or even an open D tuning, and then add that melody within the chord structure. You know, where whatever the root is that they can share, and where he can move that melody between 2-3 chords. You know, I could see that in your playing, and I didn't think you weren't using loops. I thought for sure you were, because I'm like, he's tapping so many, and there's so much going on. Whether it's delay and reverb, all of just like it's just layered, man.
Memory man delay. That's it. And then like with my guitar, when I was younger, when my brother and I first started playing shows, this was in that 2006 era. We played with this band. I can't remember their name. They were so awesome. It was over when we lived in the Thumb. And the bass player goes, you ever heard of the band Local H? I was like, yeah, of course. He's like, it's a 2-man band. I was like, seriously? He's like, you know what he did? He put a bass pickup on an angle underneath his bottom 2 strings, and that stuck with me. And so over the years, I've tried different things. Like I remember one time I like took an old bass pickup out, ripped the magnets out, unwound a bunch of wire from that, wound a new pickup, put it in, tried that. I tried a guitar pickup with a low pass filter from a car stereo at one point. And then finally, I just got on Reverb, found the cheapest like P-bass pickup I could, took half of it, stuck it in sideways into the lowest string. I was like, there we go. Now I've graduated to... what is it? It's a Seymour Duncan. It's like the super fat magnets. But I use that in my bass, my guitar for bass, and then so I've got that separate split, so I can play bass and guitar separately. So it helps hold that together, which is like, that's I can't go back now. Like I can't even write Tiny Tree songs unless I'm playing the rig, because it's like I need all my little, I need my little treats right here to,
all my snacks and treats.
I need my delays
My
and
tiny treats.
Yep. Yeah.
Buffet.
Well, with that being said, so was that a big thing? You kind of stuck to the 2-piece band. Is that just because you don't want to deal with other dickheads, or I mean, what?
Yes.
I mean, it makes it easier, I'm sure, but I like the 2-man band thing has kind of been your thing for quite a long time now, man.
I think it was not on purpose. Like my brother and I tried different people, but there was a chemistry, mostly because we were brothers, and he and I played so much together where we already had like this. It's tough when you already have such a great rapport with the people that you're playing with, that a new personality can really throw off the dynamic.
Oh yeah.
And the way Tiny Tree started was because my brother bailed on a show. We had a show booked, and Paul, the drummer for Tiny Tree, was letting us practice at his house. And one day I was just over there. I was like, "Hey, you just want to like jam or something?" And it was cool. And then Vin bailed on a show, and I said it was like 8 or 9 days before the show. And I said, "Hey, would you want to write a set and play a show with me? In like 9 days?" He goes,
"No pressure."
And so he goes, "Let's jam one more time, and if it goes good, then I'm down." And so I was like, "Okay, cool." And then the rest was history. And then like he was doing, he was trying to get another band going, and it was 4 people. And he's like, it was the biggest headache for him because it's like trying to line up everyone's schedules. Yeah. And then the beautiful thing with Paul and I is like we have, we're both super ambitious people, which is like outstanding for me because I'd never been with someone that was at the same level of ambition that I'm at. So I was like, oh, he wants to do this too. And I'm like, this is great. And then, his brain, he's a graphical guy, which I do not understand art. People that do art just fascinate me to no end. And so he does art, he does like marketing, he does all the booking. Nice. And then, he started Anima Media Group doing releases, vinyl releases and things like that. And I was just like, so that I handle all the audio, he handles all the visual, and then we meet in the middle, and then we play. And then it also works out great where it's like lining up schedules. The 2-man thing is just, hey, you free? Yep, I'm good. Let's get together.
Right.
Yeah. And that was so nice because when I was in Old Black, we'd have every Sunday we'd rehearse. We'd try and knock out like a Tuesday or Wednesday, but then the 4 of us would get together, and then we would end up shooting the breeze for 2 hours and rehearsing for 45 minutes. And like me as a person, it's like if rehearsal's at 1:00, I'm getting there at 1:45, getting my tubes warmed up, running through some stuff, getting dialed in. It's like I'm ready to go. I'm like in my brain, I'm ready to do some work. And then the hangout part kind of threw me for a loop.
Yeah.
But when we get down to business, like it was a blast. We'd have so much fun, and those guys are all just insane because James Kundinger's a monster guitar player, and then Cody on the drums is just like you couldn't ask for better guys to play with.
Right.
Yeah, I feel that too. It's like I'm always that way too. I'm like, man, we got a 2-hour session. We're going to make the most of 2 hours, and if you guys want to hang out a half hour after, we joke a little bit between. But if the conversation starts getting too much, it's like let's curtail this back in because we're here to do work. So I'm the same way, man. Because I'm like, if we're here to fucking jam, I want to jam. I mean, we're cool. We can fucking hang out afterwards or whatever. But like, we got all the time in the world to hang out. But we chiseled these 2 hours out to fucking jam.
Right.
We're jamming, bro.
Yep.
Like I want to jam.
Yep. Oh, dude.
I don't want it to be a 6-hour session either because you guys want to fuck off and do whatever all day. Like we can get a lot done in 2 hours if you shut the fuck up and we can play. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do all the stuff that isn't fun so you can have fun.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh, that's awesome.
So one thing I did forget to mention in my intro is the vocals. So now you've adapted vocals, something that that's new for you in Tiny Tree, right? I mean, it's something you've kind of incorporated. I listened to the album, I listened to this album, and I listened to some of the other singles that you guys have. For me to describe it, it would be like an ambient rock with a lot of layers. There's a lot going on there. It's some of it's kind of slow, but it's like building. Yeah. And it's just like a real atmospheric type thing. I enjoyed listening to it.
Oh, cool. Thanks, man.
It's not anything that, if you couldn't do meth and listen to it, you know what I mean? Because you couldn't clean the house very well with it.
You're supposed to do much on meth.
No, you probably
just be.
I mean, Slayer and meth, that always goes good together. But
okay, you got me.
But no, it's more of a acid type music. You know what I'm saying?
Sure,
like a weed acid type music.
Yeah.
If I'm just to explain that, I mean, I'm straight edge, so whatever. But
I listened to it 3 times in a row last night. I just let it play in the background, and I kept like going back to the playlist to check song titles. And I'll tell you, it was Idolize.
Yeah,
I kept going back to like, all right, make sure I remember that name. And then December was the other one that I kept going back to. I'm like, okay, this one keeps calling me.
Cool.
Like I'm listening. I'm multitasking. I'm like, I'm gonna get this in though.
Yeah.
I had already seen you guys. I kind of had an expectation of what it would sound like.
Yeah.
But the recorded experience is always different.
Yeah.
From the live experience, And
I do that on purpose.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
That's awesome. You should take the time to like say, okay, this is what I want it to sound like forever, but forever gets boring if I do it forever. So this is the permanent version. And then I want to take and come back to some moments and go somewhere with them live. So do you guys add like segments to your songs, live passages that are not on the album?
All the time. Yeah.
Nice.
Beautiful.
Like,
Is that improv? Or is that
mostly,
rehearsed? Yeah.
mostly, yeah. Like the song "Paper Boat," that one is my absolute favorite song to play, hands
Beautiful.
down.
Nice.
And so the way we wrote this record to me is actually kind of a flop in my opinion, just because I know what we were going for, and I just felt like our execution wasn't there yet.
It sounded good to me, production wise.
Oh, production was great.
Yeah,
I enjoyed the layers.
I really
and
went all
tones.
out on the production, almost to a fault in my opinion. So it's like our previous record, Embolisms, was like, still coming into my own as a recording engineer and producer, and then like all the things I learned between doing that record and this one. It's like Embolism, I feel like the songs were really strong, but we played on those out a lot, which was great. So we figured everything out and then went and recorded it. And then like with this record, we wrote this was in the COVID times. So we came over to my house. Paul and I both are huge Peter Gabriel fans, and so that was a big inspiration for this record.
That's funny. I was totally getting Phil Collins / Peter Gabriel Genesis vibes out of some of these songs,
especially Sulax.
Yeah, Pink Floyd and I would dare say Mastodon were other names that just as I'm listening
I love
to
Mastodon.
it.
I also felt some of the parts where BT Bam gets a little weird sometimes, like a little spaced out. Like that's some of the vibe I was getting off of it too.
Cool.
Yeah, but yeah, it was great, dude. It was great.
I love hearing what people compare us to, because sometimes like when you're in your own little world, you're like, what do we sound like?
Yeah, because you're never writing from that angle.
I want to sound like A, B, and C. It's just like what has filtered through after all the years and what comes out after that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, never do I pick up an instrument and say I want to sound like this band right now in that riff. I'm just what's my mood? Yeah. What am I thinking? What am I feeling right now? Am I a little bit I need to get this out of me? Yep. Am I jacked up? Am I hype? Am I just like, oh man, it's been a week. So that's where I'm sure you come from, and we all come from when we sit down and write. But those are the things that I got out of it when I listened to it. I was like,
cool.
He probably didn't sit down and mean to sound like any of this. I hope he doesn't take any of this the wrong way.
No, not at all.
I mean, I hope he likes these bands too. But
that's so cool. Like Jeremy McClary goes, he's like, this kind of reminds me of Brand New, and I never listened to Brand New before.
Okay. I'm familiar.
So then I started listening to Brand New, and then my brother was like, I think you'd really like Science Fiction. The production on this record's outstanding. And I listened to that record and I was like, no, you're right. I love the way the production is. I stole a ton of things, just like the way he uses room mics on guitars and the way he treats the room mics for drums and vocals. And it's just like, I'm like, I love all that. I'm going to make this my own now. So now when I'm doing recording, it's like, I have room mics everywhere, because the way that air glues the sound together, I'm just like, it gets me so excited. I was like, oh man, that sounds so cool.
Yeah, especially if you got a good room for it. Like, you know what I mean? It's because it's all about that room sound, getting that, making it almost giving that live, pulse to it.
Yeah, and it gives you a reference point to the energy and the volume, which is really great. Oh man, I could go on and on about that.
Before we dive into it, let's take it back though. The vocals.
Yeah,
I was asking you about vocals, and all of a sudden you adapting that, because that's something that I've been familiar with you and your style and different bands for a long time. But all of a sudden here comes vocals. Obviously you're a 2-man band, so you got to add something else. Was that like an evolution within you? Like, hey, I'm going to step up and do some vocals now. I want to add another element, or was it a combination of both, or was it just one of those things where it's like, now I have this confidence that I'm going to fucking say some shit on the mic, or,
That's a piece of it. Yeah, it's a little bit of all of that stuff. When I was in Old Black, I did heavy vocals.
Okay.
And I loved it. I loved being on the mic. I loved, like, being in an instrumental band is one thing, but for me as a performer, singing and playing guitar, like, they brought a whole nother element to the show for me, which was really exciting. And then when Paul and I started playing, I was like, dude, I want to sing. I want to do all kinds of stuff. Like, I feel like where I'm at right now is like, I'm happy with where I'm at as a guitar player, but I really want to become a good vocalist. So like, that's like my new journey. Like, I quit smoking. That's like our last tour that we did in February. I quit right before the tour started. And so I have these little nicotine pouches that I haven't given up nicotine. I've given up cigarettes.
This is still a step in the right direction.
It's a good step in the right direction.
But they're doing that, like vocal warm-ups. before shows because I realized, man, it's because we used to do a softball song like first, but like this song sets my voice in the pocket. So I was like, we're going to do this one first if it feels the vibe that we're putting out. But yeah, I wanted to do vocals. I loved how the show felt when I was performing on the mic and playing guitar. It was more exciting for me. And so, and I also love like when you get a song and then all of a sudden you track vocals over it, it's just like, oh, now this is like a song. And then it just takes you to a whole nother world. And then there's things you can do with your voice that is super challenging to do with, like for me, guitar. I was just like, oh, I can do, harmonize these or create these layers. And so then sometimes I go overboard. And like right now on our latest record is super stripped back. We're like, this one, like, 11 was a record that broke us, so to speak. For me, as it's like we went too far on, like, we sucked all the feel out, in my opinion, because it's like we did it to a grid. Paul's playing, he wanted to be super simple on his drum parts, and so then it was like so much so where he's just like, I was too simple. And then like my guitar playing was just like, I was like, I want to keep it super simple so I can sing. And so this was like us figuring that out. It's like, how can we lay an instrumental bed to where I can do more vocally? Like the song Idolize, like that vocals drive that song. Mm-hmm. And we've modified that song live. Like there's that whole passage where I do, when you're down in the hole and the lying alone.
Yeah,
like,
that stuck in my head.
Yeah, I could not play that and sing it live because that's the way a lot of things is. Like I will not write the vocals until the whole thing is recorded, and I write all the vocals, and I'm like, okay, I can't do that live, and I can't do that live. So it's like, so then we modify things. I can't play the guitar solo live, so it's like we got to make a really big impact here. So we like basically shorten that whole passage, get the big strip that back, and then close it out. Paper Boat gets longer. Like we milk that one out a little bit longer from our previous record. Riffer, that goes into a whole jam session afterward. But like to your question earlier, is like how we songs to record to live is like, we'll be like, okay, we're going to do this song, we're going to jam to connect them, and then do this song, jam to connect those, and then jam to that one.
See, this is why you have band practice. This is the perk and the luxury of having like a lot of band practices, I would think. You just
No, we wing it live.
Get out of here.
No, because
that's cool though. Yeah, that's what a fucking jam is.
Yeah, I like
you probably have a few things you come back to. I imagine like
sometimes, yeah,
oh,
like
really?
these things, like they, yes and no. So initially, I love being uncomfortable on stage. I was like, okay, let's see how uncomfortable we can make ourselves. Like when we first started playing, we'd be like, okay, we're gonna play these 4 songs and we're gonna jam until we shit the bed. And then when it gets so bad, then we're just gonna rip chord and pull out and say, thank you, we're Tiny Tree, see you later. But now it's just like Riffer is just like, then we'll figure something out. Like the song Drowning was written from a jam. I remember we were playing in Fort Wayne, and Paul just goes into this and then we started jamming, and then we had like 4 or 5 shows after. So I was like, let's massage this idea. And then like the jam we do after Riffer is now it's like we've got that one figured out, that's concrete. And then we have this other jam that happened when we were playing in Kalamazoo. And I was like, that's a song to me. And so like they start with winging it in the moment, and then they will turn into something concrete. That's my favorite way to write is like when we come down to write, it's just like we just start jamming, and then Paul will be like, that was kind of cool. Let's see if we can come up with something there. And then my mind is like, if the song is meant to be, we'll remember it. So like we'll record our practices, and sometimes we'll listen to something, we're like, man, that song's really cool. And then we try and recreate it, and it's just never the same.
It's not. It's not.
And so it's like, that's where I just come back to is like, if I remember how to play this riff, then this song was meant to happen.
Yeah. Sure.
You know? Yeah. So yeah, I'm all over the place right now.
Oh, it's good, man. We're just here to talk. There's no agenda, my brother. We got time.
Yeah.
I'm not really a jammer. I'm like the worst jammer. I'm a sit down and rehearse guy. I'm a sit down and learn it front to back as it's meant to be. Hey, send me that file with the demo or the scratch track, and I'll put in my hours on my own.
Yeah.
And then I'll come to you rehearsed. And I'll have like, because I need to hear the guitar and the drums so I can find where I fit as a
Oh,
bassist.
absolutely, yeah.
I need to have his melody. I need to know what we're doing on the drums, because if it's a groove, I'm going to sustain. I'm going to hold out more. You know, but if we're doing like a trot, then I'm bum 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 bum. You know, then I'm gonna approach it differently. So once I have those two things going for me, I'll sit down and rehearse and find where I fit. And then lyrically or vocally, I handled a lot of that duty in the last album.
Sweet.
With our album, everything had to be like to what I can play. So I would literally I would sit here and go like, well, this is the basic rhythm of it. This is how I'm hearing the vocal patterns.
Yeah.
And I would maybe even have the instrument like in my hand.
Yeah.
And I would write like, okay, this is what I'm hearing, and can I play that? And okay, maybe I need a different syllable here. And then it just comes down to like mundane things, like, because you're technical sometimes on the left hand, and you're like, well, I can riff and play, though. I can riff and play and sing and riff at the same time.
Yeah.
But it has to go with the riff, right?
Yep.
It has to, and you know a band when you hear them, you're like, okay, that guy is definitely playing and singing at the same time, because this is syncopated kind of a feel to the vocals a little bit. But that's something I had to sit down and rehearse a lot and write and go back over and over and over. So if you're like, hey, do you want to jam? Like the wind almost goes out of my. I'm like, that sounds so anxiety based. Like, just like, what are we gonna do? Whatever, just a couple chords. It sounds like that never ends. It might not. Like, like you said, until we shit the bed. Like, until I'm so tired of jamming those same 3 chords, and it's just like it's finally dead. And then you're like, please stop. Please stop. Please stop playing.
So for us, it was always a little different, because like getting into Infinite, everything's calculated, counted, fucking everything's precise or whatever. But before that, I was in a band called Room 237 with my old drummer Rowland and this dude named Steve Deegan, and we would rehearse our stuff, and we had some metal shit and some technical stuff, but we had a lot of like jammy shit, and it's the same way. We record it, and we would just jam for hours. I mean, we'd fucking get stoned and just jam. We'd have so many sweet fucking things we'd come up with, and we'd kind of tie those in with the metal thing. And I love jamming because you just come up with some cool shit.
Yeah.
But as to what you were saying, it was always hard to be like, that's cool as fuck. Don't know how it happened. Let's try to recreate it. And then it's just not there anymore. And you're just like, what? Fuck, man. How do we get that back? And it's just something where everybody was doing something specific. Then you start thinking about it, and then it's just like,
it loses luster.
Now I'm thinking about it, and that's why it's just not there anymore. You know?
Yeah.
So.
And that's what's so exciting about like doing that live is I remember this one show. It was like a powerful experience for me. We played at Speciation like 2 years ago, and we played with our buddies in Arsum, and I just remember having like this very like peaceful feeling that whole day. But then we started playing, and the energy of the room was just like, I don't know, how you can feel the energy from the people that they give off. And it was like the energy was really great. And I remember like looking outside, and it was like snowing big, lake effect snow, and we were jamming, and I was just like, oh man, I was in another world. And like Paul and I were like, we had our calculated jam spot. We're like, okay, so we're gonna go into a jam, and then we went into this jam, and I was just like, oh man. And then like just the energy from the people, it was so cool. It's like I remember that show, and there's actually a picture that somebody grabbed, and I look at that picture. I was like, that picture right there embodies the feelings that I was feeling at that show. And I also remember, like, too, for me, it was like, oh, I felt like I sang really good that day.
Yes,
which is like my biggest criticism to myself is it's like guitars. It's like whatever. Right. I know guitar.
Yeah,
you can riff.
Like,
it's like, did I sing good? Did I sing good? Yeah. And I find when I'm super caffeinated is like when I sing really good, or if I'm fortunate enough to have an Adderall that day. To like really
motivated.
Yeah. But see, like Adderall, because like I am ADD, and so like when I take it, it just like levels me out.
Oh, okay.
So it's like I'm not, often, spring break zone. So it's like if I
spring break.
So it's like when I get it, it's like I get really focused, I pay attention, I can really lock in on my pitch and find it, right away. And then that's one thing I've been finding with doing vocal exercises is learning in my throat where pitches are, because that's the biggest thing is like in your head, it's just like, oh, I need to put my throat right here. But then like actually hearing it, like I'll sit down with my guitar and I'll do like, this, do the first, the root, the fifth, the octave, go dun, 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 and then just kind of work my way up, go to the lowest I can go, just to try and help build some of that muscle memory, so that, because like working with Jesse. So Jesse and I have become really great friends. And so he's on the opposite journey. He's just like, I got vocals figured out. I want to become a better guitar player. And I'm the inverse. And so I started talking to him, and I'm like, okay, it's like, what things are you doing, or how did you get to where you are? Because he's just such an amazing vocalist, you know? And so he and I would just chit chat, and I was like, I asked him point blank, I was like, how much did quitting smoking help you? And he goes, oh, dude. He's just like, I can go from I can play a 2-hour show and not be out of gas. I was like, okay, and that was it. I quit that day.
Nice. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, the music always comes first, right?
It's wild, yeah.
Shit, like if you love it enough, you'll have a reason to not do that.
Yeah.
Have a bad habit anymore. You know,
you find more out about yourself. You know what really motivates you. Like, what is it that you want to do? What's it going to cost? What's it going to take? What do I have to sacrifice? Oh, that's fine.
Yeah,
I'll do it.
Yeah.
I don't even. Yeah. So
if
you have something going for you in your life, I think you would give up almost anything that you don't need in order to get better.
100%.
And I think that goes to other people's health and life choices too. It's like, do I really need that? No, I can sacrifice that. I can be fine and better without it. So more power to you for that.
Yeah.
I mean, the more power to music, really. The power of music.
Well, seriously, yeah.
For me, that's kind of the reason why I quit smoking weed like 3 months ago. I used to be all day, every day, but just like I feel like I'm more clear in my mind. I feel like I can converse better, kind of recall my words better. I'm just like, that's more important than smoking all day, honestly. You know what I mean? So it's what will you sacrifice to be better, that kind of thing. I did notice, so speaking of Adderall, then you guys have the song Adderall.
Yeah.
And then after listening to that album and then listening to that song, it's just like a drastic.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say? It's completely drastic. Because it's like, okay, now I'm hearing the Addison that I knew before with the riffs, the heaviness. There's some drive in there. So what does that look like? Is that like a trajectory that you guys are trying to do?
That's
or are you
a
just doing what you guys do and that's what happens kind of thing?
That song just kind of happened super organically. That song was actually written. I had my lowest string tuned down to, so what is it? F sharp. That song was written with, so it's like double F sharp, so octave low, so it's like really low. I was just like, that's a little too ridiculous. And it's like, I hate tuning during shows where it's just like, I usually tune once and then let it ride.
Yeah.
And so that was like, I'll write it. Let's do it and drop, B, F sharp, B. And so that was just a fun one. I was like, I really like this riff. And Paul was like, okay. And so
do it.
And so we did it. And then we recorded that and 2 other songs last year. We're going to do as singles because another song that's a super oddball, kind of like that one. That's still just sitting in a session. I haven't tracked any vocals to that one yet. And then, but yeah, no, actually, this latest record.
Is it the one are you working on it right now?
I got to do all the vocals on it. Everything else is tracked on it.
I see you guys are recording. Yeah. So when you say latest, this is what you guys are doing right now, about to release.
I'm hoping to have it out
later, I should say.
Next spring. I think would be is our goal. Coming into this latest record, I was like, here's the criteria that I want coming into it. I was like, we have to be able to play every single song front to back live.
Yes.
Second thing is like, I need to have my vocal parts pretty much figured out and be able to sing those live. And then the last piece of the puzzle is we want to track this record live because I felt like when we did stuff to the grid for our music, it just kind of like pulled a little bit of that realness out. And like, especially for Paul doesn't like playing drums by himself. He's just like, I need to play with somebody. He's like, I feed off of their energy. So he's like, I need someone to play with for me to play drums. So I was like, you know what? I always take the biggest risks on our own record for like trying things out. Like if someone's coming to do a record with me, I'm like 95% safe with 5% riskiness. Like every session I do, I always try to do one new thing to see how it turns out. See if it's something cool I can chase. But with this, I was like, we're going to do it live in the same room. And so that was really exciting for me because then like the first half of our record is one complete take.
Oh, cool.
And so like that was really cool. Like we did 2 passes of it. The first one, like Paul and I write in vinyl time to where it's like 22 minutes a side. So the way we think and write is just like, will this fit on a side for a record? Because we have all of our records pressed. So we're like, okay, the first time we did a pass on it, we're like, we're going to play this song, jam to this song, jam to this song, then done, and then jam out of it. So the first pass we did was 28 minutes. It was like, that won't fit on a record. So we're like, okay, let's do that again. We're going to shorten this one up a little bit. And then this was good. So I actually put my phone up on my guitar cab facing Paul with a stopwatch.
Oh, okay.
And so Paul always had a reference to where we were at in this stretch here. And so finally he's, we're ending this thing out. I'm like fading out on my guitar, and then the last bell hit, and then he goes, "Nope, that was 22 minutes on the dot." I was like, "Okay, cool."
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my mind is blown over here. I'm looking at Addison telling me the story, and I'm just like, seriously, you guys are watching like a counter to like record your album, like a timer, just going in, we're in, done, set, good. And my mind is blown because, again, I got to have it dialed in, and I don't mind if it's to a grid or live, but I just got to know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And you guys are just like, and we're going to feel into it. And then the nod and the look and the eyes and moving on to the next thing. Like, that's crazy to me. But I love, and I also love how you like say you record to like vinyl time.
Yeah.
Like 2 halves of an album. I could see that, like cassette time, front, back side of a cassette, I like to look at things in terms of the ebb and flow of an album. Like, has it been too long since we've had a breath here?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, that's a cool way of looking at it too. So those are 2 new perspectives for me, like just in terms of writing an album or how you approach the thought of it, like how it's gonna lay out in a track list or a sequencing manner. Yeah, it's really cool.
And then you hope to God that side A and B fuse up together to where, like, when it's listed on Spotify, that it's all going to flow cohesively, which we lucked out big time, where it's like, so the rest of the song, so like side B, if it ends up being side B, is like we had, what did we have? We have, these are working titles. We have German Shit, Living Large, and then we have Picture Day. So we have 3 songs, and then there's like a whole guitar interlude thing that I do. But I was just like, it just ended up perfectly to where like the end of side A nails perfectly right into German Shit. And I was like, oh, fuck yeah.
Nice.
So then, and the other thing too is like where I like to look at, it's like, if people are listening to a record, is they're being very purposeful with their listening. So it's like they're paying attention to it. So it's like we have to have the right feel on each side to where it's just like it feels right. Like I remember when I was, so Jesse, I did his last record, the self-titled one. And when I mastered it for digital, I did it one way, but I had a very specific moment that had a huge impact on me. So my Uncle Dave, he's in the service, so he has, fucking badass stereo, Kenwood, all the primo shit, right?
Right.
And I remember we had somebody else master our previous record, Embolisms. I was like, yeah, I want to listen to our record on your turntable. And I just remember just being like, this sounds like dog shit. I hate it so much. So when I mastered this record for vinyl, I was super purposeful on making sure all the dynamics were right. Because like we were listening to Rush, Foghat, Blue Oyster Cult, and these records sounded huge, and like the impact was there. The transients were snappy, and I was like, I have to make sure that translates. So moving forward to doing Jesse's record. So I mastered it one way for digital, and then when I did it for vinyl, I treated it a little bit different because his vocal performance is so powerful in that band. I was like, this needs to be more intimate and really draw the listener in. So I remember finding myself like listening with my eyes closed and be like, am I getting lost in this song? Is this song like drawing me in? Because like my thinking is, if someone's listening to this record, they're paying attention. And so, the way that I sculpted the low end on it, the mid-range, specifically his voice, and I remember using the PSP Avedis EQ on that 1.8K right on his vocals, fits every time. I was like, it just drew his vocal out to where it just like sat so nicely once it went into the compressor. I was like, oh yeah, that's it. So it's like creating another experience for the vinyl listener, which is like, because music at the end of the day, it's like, if you're not drawing emotion from listening to it, then to me, I failed as a mixer. It's like, it's so important towards just like, you bring your art to me, I need to capture that art, and I need to translate all that emotion and energy through this process. And it's like tracking. That was the biggest thing that I learned, is like tracking is 99% of the sound of the record.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's
Oh,
it's
yeah,
like I was just
yeah.
like, oh my
It's-
god.
It's the dynamics. It's like if you're a guitar player, it's your right hand, because
Yeah,
you could have
yeah.
two guys play the same riff, and you might just want the one guy to play it because
Yep.
the other guy just doesn't have it. And
That's
know,
what Jeremy and I went through
yeah,
with Dane
that-
Devine. He
yeah.
and Bob would go back and forth.
Yeah,
It's like, you're better here. You track my part.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of those things that I've learned through recording, and I've learned a lot over the last handful of years, and that was one of the tricky things with the Infinite Design record. When we started the record, it didn't come out till June of this year, but we started in 2019, so I didn't
Yeah.
know a lot, and then I studied a whole bunch, and there's like, man, I could have did like all these different things.
Yeah.
Especially tracking drums, getting different sounds, and but yeah, just learning that too. It's like when we did the Iron Sharpens Iron record, it's like, yeah, like Larry, he's a good guitar player, but he hasn't been playing as long as me, so it would just
Yeah.
sound better if I recorded all the parts.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
some people have to kind of put their ego down and be like, hey, dude, it's still your part. You're still on the record, but
Yep.
like just because you didn't record it, no one's really going to know. But do you want it to sound the best or not? Because
Bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo.
that's a
That's the
big
biggest
thing,
thing.
man. Is just
Yeah.
the playing and just making sure that it's there. It's like it's all in the right hand. It's all in the dynamics of the drums. And
Yeah.
are you smashing the fuck out of those cymbals when you're recording? I mean, if you're going for that, cool, but you should be smashing those drums and those skins hard and
Yeah.
trying not as hard to wash everything out with the cymbals. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just tricks like that you learn along the way. It's like
Yeah.
has a lot to do with it.
It's huge. Like the American Cheese Records, another brother combo, Leo and Carl. And they remind me a lot of my brother and I, where it's just like, I remember we were sound checking Leo's drums, and I had Carl's guitar piped in for him to play along to. And he's just like, I know exactly what he's going to do on drums right here. Yep, there's that fill. I know that. Where it's like, and they tracked everything. Leo tracked all the drums. Carl tracked all the guitar, all the bass. And then he's also the vocalist in the band, so he did the vocals. And then they had Ross, the other guitar player, do his vocals. But it's just like, it's exactly that. Like, they're like, well, it's the best thing for the recording. It's just like,
exactly.
he's just like, I'm a tighter player, so it's like, I'm going to play everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, it turns out great. So
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that got me, it goes a long way.
Yeah. And,
You know?
and like I said, it really is an ego thing at that point. It's like,
100%.
I got to be on the record. No one's ever going to know, but
No.
you
Yep.
want the record to sound fucking tight. You want it to sound together, or don't you? I mean,
Yep.
so
It's a team effort. You got to
Yeah.
come together and collaborate on it. And if one musician handles all of it, it doesn't mean like you didn't write your part.
Exactly.
Or it doesn't mean you're not going to perform your part.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going out and you're still a member of the band. You guys wrote the song together. You were in
Exactly.
the room. But yeah, if it's more efficient for one guy, he's just like in the pocket in the studio recording. There's
Yeah.
no nerves about that person. They just,
Yep.
hey, this ain't even but my third instrument, so it ain't even a problem for me, fam. I can do this for you all day.
Yeah.
You just sit there and watch. Make sure I'm doing it right the way you like it.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to play this on stage, so make sure it's happening the way you like it.
right,
Like,
you're
Yeah.
not adding all this little shit like, oh,
Right.
I didn't know I had to play that now.
How many pinch harmonics were in there?
Guilty.
Oh man! And then there's like the horror stories, like because Jesse, like he's a purist, like he did his first records to tape, and so I would tell him, be like, it's like, this record, I retract all the bass. He's like, are you serious? I was like, oh, it wasn't tight enough. So it's like all those horror stories. It's like actually I
Yeah.
learned that guitar part and retract it with a better
Yeah,
tone. Where it's
yeah.
like, it's at the end of the day, like I don't tell them unless the artist knows. Or like something seems different. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, well maybe then I'll put the old one back in and try and make it work.
this guy.
But it's just like I'll be sitting there and I'll be like trying to dial. It's like, man, it's just not sitting right. It comes
Yeah.
down to that right hand.
Yeah.
The way that you attack the string. I was like, man, this would be so much tighter if. Instead of me sitting there and just ripple editing and trying to push stuff into
Yeah.
place, it's like I could learn the song in 2 minutes and play it front to back. Where it's not often, but I've done it a handful of times.
And there's also decisions that need to be made, right? Because when you're talking about like something that I talked to Nick about on the Infinite record, there was parts, and I'm just like, well, when we approach new music from here, what we need to do is like, what's best for the part. Like,
Oh, yeah.
You don't necessarily. I know you're a sick bass player, but you don't need to be doing all this if
doesn't
we're
make
just doing
sense.
a groove.
Yeah.
Play 3 whole open notes. No one's gonna be like, "Oh, you fucking suck" because you played 3 open notes and you bass tap the rest of the fucking song. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like,
yeah.
you got to think about those things too. Like
Neanderthal that bass.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah.
As I've learned and evolved to, like, it's all about the songs for me anymore, bro.
Yes,
Can
yes.
you write a good fucking song? That's
Right.
all I care about. I don't
Yeah.
care about all this. Like, you've seen us playing Infinite. We always try to play just a beyond what we could actually play just because we wanted to be like, hey, look at fucking, we can play this, you know? And then, you know, that was something that we held to a high regard, but like coming around to it's like, dude, can we just write a good fucking song that's like chunky riffs and like cool riffs? And like, it doesn't have to be technical. No one fucking cares about that except like maybe like 5 musicians, but the guy that's actually going to listen to your record, like, is it a good song? Do all the parts sound good together? When them are open notes, do they all sound good in tune? Are you playing it like, you know what I mean? Is it chorded out right when you play that chord? Are all the notes in tune? Like, instead of just trying to fucking riff soup it, like I just don't
riff
like the
soup? I'm taking that one. I'm taking that.
I don't like riff soup anymore, bro. I've been there and I've done that. You know what I mean? So, but it's just like for me, and that's why some of this stuff, and we talk on this podcast, I usually give this like the deathcore stuff. Like I kind of shit on it a lot, and not for any reason that it's not good, not for any reason that the musicians are bad or they're less than, because a lot of them are killer and badass, but it's just like the vocal just rants and raves for 3.5 minutes. There's nothing to grab onto. There's not a vocal pattern. There's not a memorable riff because it's like 12 riffs back to back, and it's like if you're going for that, cool, but like for me, and there's bands that can do it great. Dillinger Escape Plan, you know, there's a handful of bands that can do it, but I just want a good fucking song, dude. And I want to, when you're recording, what's best for the song to make it a good song?
Yeah,
totally.
That stuff seems very like competitive to me. Like, let's see how fast we can be until we break it down, you know, and then let's break it down further, and then we'll do another couple songs just like it. And you know, like, I'm not trying to hate on that genre. There's guys or people in that genre who do it really well. And then there's just a bunch of copycats, and I think that can be said for almost any genre. But
being we'll steer a little bit now into, you know, the recording and you being a producer and engineer. Like we'll steer the conversation there. But like being that you start learning these things along the way, you know, like you saying like retracking the bass. It's just like, well, you didn't do it right, and you're not listening for what I'm listening for, or even while you're tracking, you're thinking about mixing. Right? You're not even like, you want the performance because it's going to make it easier to mix. But you're also like 4 steps ahead where this guy's just worried about getting his part right. And you're like, that's cool and all. But like, how is it going to translate when it fits in at
the full picture?
So there's 500 hertz. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, like you're calculating all that, thinking about all those things. You know?
So there was one major thing that was like an aha moment for me. I hadn't done records in a while because I was busy with the restaurant. And so the band Earth Radio. So Justin Avdek and I we did a handful of stuff together. And so we met up one day, and I was like, dude, you know what would be really cool is if we could just go to a cabin and write and record a record in 2 weeks, and after the 2 weeks is done, the record's done. Like, no more. So he's like, all right, I love that idea. So then he's just like, I can't get a cabin, but my parents will let us go to their house, which is near the water in North Muskegon. So I moved all my stuff in there. He called his, you know, the musicians he wanted on the record, and we wrote and recorded this record over a month at their place. And the thing that I watched a ton of Produce Like a Pro with Warren Hewart, and I learned more from the interviews with the engineers going through their studios. Just like, yeah, really, this compressor just does it for me. And I was just like dog ear that in my head. I was like, okay, they like that compressor, or like they like that EQ. But the thing that like I went for in that one was feel. If the feel is right, the tone will follow. You know, and so then. That's what I kind of slipped into and just kept building upon that. It's like, if we get the feel right, all the tones will follow. Like when we did the Dead Shepherds record, I had never done a record to tape. I had this Tascam 388. It's a 1/4-inch 8-track. And I was like, I really want to do this record to tape. And so Lou Fano, which is also the guitar player singer for Funeral Noise, was the guitar player singer for Dead Shepherd. So it was Lou Fano, Chris Dragone on guitar, Justin Avdek on bass, and then Evan Fulmer on drums. And we tracked that entire record live in the same room. Even like the acoustic guitar, I was like, I saw Tom Petty do it. I was like, let's try it. I'm like, if Tom Petty does it, then let's do it. Yeah. And so it's like, I remember we were listening to playback, and I remember looking at Justin, I was like, I can't tell if this sounds really cool or really shitty. He's like, no, it sounds really cool. But just the energy that they created as musicians, like, made the whole sound of the song right away towards this, like, could the snare drum be louder? Sure, I mic the drums with 2 microphones. I only used 6 channels because I had to have 2 tracks to dump down to, so I could add additional leads for Chris and then lose vocals. And then, like, because once you build the sound of the song, then the choices that, like, especially for like a vocal mic will play, because Chris's dad gave us this really badass Neumann mic, and we tried it, and we're just like, this thing is way too clear. And we used one of my ribbon mics. It was like, okay, that fits in with the song. So then, like, all the cascading decisions beyond that point kind of influence which things I'm going to choose, which mic preamps I'm going to use. Am I going to process anything on the way in? Or it's like, that kind of triggers my thinking of like, okay, I'm going to do this. Or like, maybe I'm going to run tape on the input and get the tape sound. But sometimes that can be, I've learned this the hard way, of like being too aggressive with the way I commit sounds. Like when I track, I typically favor my outboard gear for tracking. And I've actually slipped away from using as much outboard gear tracking to where, like, now I love doing, especially with drums, I'll strap the thing on Reaper. I'm a Reaper user. So there's a way you can record the input and then the effects. So there's an input effects and there's a post effects. And so, I'll do the input effects. So anything recorded through the input effects is committed. It's there forever.
Yeah, for sure.
So on drums, I strap a tape machine on every single microphone, and then I strap it's through Plugin Alliance, the API console, just to get the color of that sound, those 2520 op amps, which it's like I have an API master bus in my my console, and that right there. So like drums, for instance, like I will build the drum mix on my console and listen to everything together. So it's like, I learned this from Rick Johnson. This is like a mind-blowing moment. Paul and I tracked our first couple of songs with Rick, and he was sound checking drums, and he's just like, all right, play drums. And I was like, oh, that's genius, because then you get to hear the drums together as a whole. So it's like the drummer's playing, I'll just bring up faders, listen to everything, check phase on all the microphones, make any EQ adjustments. Be like, okay, this mic's not hitting it right here, let me try moving it. If that's not it, then we're going to try a different mic. And then once I get the mix built in the console, I pull everything off the console and I audition everything through the session. And then it's like, then you hear how the drums sound through tape. And I was like, okay, here we go. Now it's actually starting to sound like drums. Like drums to me on tape, just like, there's just something about the way tape absorbs the transients that just gives like a smoothness to the sound. Mm-hmm. And then I may do some stuff with like the API. I really like expanders on drums versus gates. Gates seem really grabby to me, so I love expanders because it's like you can just like turn the mic down, and then when the transient comes through, it opens up and then just kind of falls right back into place. I love that. Yeah. And then but yeah, so like having that foundation is like, through the years I've been like super critical of myself and like capturing the kick drum. Really getting a good kick drum sound, trying every mic under the sun, buying new mics. And I was listening to a Kurt Ballou record. I was like, why does this cymbal sound so big? And then I bought a different set of small diaphragm condensers. I was like, oh man, now I'm getting the weight out of the cymbals. Okay, cool. And it's like, so I'm constantly being critical, being like, okay, is the decay on the snare nice? And then the next thing was just like, I bought a drum set. I actually bought it from the drummer from American Cheese. I was like, okay, cool. I've recorded this drum set. I know what the kick drum sounds like. I know what the toms sound like. I love this drum set. They're great. Bought them from him. I got another snare from Paul. It's an indie snare, which is actually my favorite snare to record. It has a sensitivity to where, like, when Paul's playing, he does a lot of ghost notes. So it's like I need a snare that's super sensitive. Yeah. So when I mic it underneath, it's picking all that up so I can get all that little stuff in between his hits. So it's like I could easily spend a ton of money on bass drums and snare drums.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And when like I was tracking Short Hair Domestics, Shirton Benai, he's just like, oh, you like this sound? He's like, you should check this one out. You should check this one out. And I was just like, this is dangerous because he's a drum guy. Right. It's like, so it's like we were able to bond so much because like overall that time where it's like I'm learning, it's like, oh, I like this snare sound here. And then that's another thing I've been critical of is the tuning of the snare. Does the tuning of the snare match the vibe of the music?
Yeah,
Like, does it need to
That's
be
big.
higher? Does it
Yeah.
need to be? Yeah, you know, it's a huge piece you don't think about until you're like listening to it, and then like 9 times out of 10, it's like I'll capture the kick drum and was like, it's too high pitched. Sample. All right, I love this one.
Right.
You know. And then my favorite sample pack is the Modern and Massive by Get Good Drums.
Oh yeah, they got good shit.
Oh
I
my
believe
God.
I have that one too. Yeah, they got good shit. So let's back up just a little bit. What? I'm actually disappointed that you got the headphone on, so I can't see that earring. But
My feather. I love that you brought that up.
I keep catching it. I'm looking and then I'm looking.
I always get a kick out when I'm talking to somebody. I can just see their eyes do
Just
this,
look at
and they
them.
look over. They see just dangling there on the
the
side.
next one should be a dream catcher, bro.
You know, I shit you not. I have been saying that, and I keep tell my wife and my daughters like, you got to get a real one with feathers. I was like, I just don't think it would hold up. It's on my list. If I find one, there's a chance the next time you see me, there's a dream catcher hanging from my ear.
So backing up a little bit, what got you into just being an engineer and then just kind of wanting to dive all into it? I mean, that's the thing about it is like I consider myself an engineer. I've recorded records and I know how to do things. I don't dive into it as deep as you. Sometimes I'm more of a minimalist, you know, and I've kind of gotten to the point where I know what I like to do, and for me it was a lot more vocal recordings because I did a lot more hip hop stuff, you know. But now for me, my priorities are this podcast is all I want to do, and then just like jam. And like if I record something here or there, it might happen or whatever. But like it's just one of those things where it's like all these little decisions, and then you start opening up the gate, right? Oh, I need to buy this. I need to buy this, and then you're fucking $28,000 in the hole just with mics and snare drums. You know what I mean?
Oh,
it's
dude,
like
I
one of
spent
those
so much
things.
money on
Oh, I know, and that's one of the things where it's like. So I was going to ask you. You ever heard of URM Academy?
Oh yeah.
So they have a podcast, and that's where like I learned a ton of shit just listening to all the interviews on there and like what they use and the decisions they make, and you know just being able to have the ear for it. And you know different preamps. Like I didn't know anything about that. That's why I kind of hit you up, and I apologize I never got back with you, but life gets busy and shit happens, you know, or whatever.
Offer still on the table.
Yeah, I would still love to come over and just, you know, learn as much. I'm always down to learn, especially when it comes to recording, you know.
I think it'd be a
know.
blast. Bring a band and we'll record a song.
That'd be cool shit.
Because then it's like, okay, so you can get inside my brain, and then you can be like, this is okay. Now you're seeing it, hearing it, and then keep going.
So, but yeah, I just kind of want to know what opened the door for you, because I understand my love for it, and I got really into it too, especially listening to that podcast and everything. Is like, man, I want to record and learn as much as I can, but that's also just a very time-consuming thing too. You know, it's like learning all that and just nerding out over the preamps and you know what I mean, and then like learning what the preamps do, and then adding the saturation, and then like all of the different things you can get into, exciters, expanders, limiters, and it just list never goes on. And then there's like this weird fucking black hole that you can get into. It's like I have thousands of dollars of plugins on that computer.
Me too.
And I'm sure you do. And you got way more outboard gear than I got. I don't really even have that much outboard gear. Everything I do is usually in the box. If I don't like it, this is the room I usually record drums in. So it's like I don't have much of a room. You get what? So I'm resampling, and it works for what the music I'm trying to put together. You know, I'm not trying to put. I'm doing hardcore and death metal. That's what I'm doing. So that's the sound you get. A lot of that's replacement anyway, and it's a real direct, dry sound. You know, like some of the heavy guitar tones and some of the spaces definitely you can use, but some of the music that you do, more of the rock and those kind of things, you can add.
Definitely
those
love
elements,
rock
you know?
and roll.
So,
Heavy records are.
Dude, heavy records are a bitch.
Whole
because,
other animal.
Because like I've noticed anything that has dynamics, it just sounds so much better off rip. Like clarity, you can really get them drums fitting in the pocket. You can get everything fitting in the right space in the EQ. But when you start distorting everything and everything's going fucking 220 BPM and the snares blasting and the kick drums are blasting, it's like the real specific where everything has to fit. You know,
it's a whole other animal. And that like learning, like doing heavy records, like when I did the Slugchild record, I was fortunate enough to where those guys actually had the chops. Those guys were like the drummer, Dave. He is that tight. Like, I was just like, I didn't move any of his drum hits. I was like, his double kicks are on, his snares are on. With like, the biggest thing with like heavy shit that I've learned is like mid-range on guitar. And so where I've gotten into mic preamp is a big thing for me. It's just like on my console, I kind of have a little bit of everything. I have transformer coupled. I have transformer coupled with a different mic chip in it. Then I have the regular mic pre that came with the console, but I've upgraded all the op amps in my console. I've really had become to have a distaste for a very common op amp in a lot of electronics just because it's very muddy and tinny. And then so all my channel strips are DC coupled. There's no caps in the path, which makes a huge influence on transient response. And then when I got the biggest game changer for me was getting really good converters. That was like over the years. So I need to rewind and talk about like my progression of like aha moments, because I feel like that journey is so important to realize, being like, okay, why did this record sound like shit versus what I'm doing now? Because like that progression of learning gear. So if we rewind, like when I was first recording, I had a Digi 001 and I had a Carvin. I still have it. It's an S16 studio mixer. And so it's like all I had was preamps. I couldn't EQ anything on the way in. So it's like I record the sound, listen, and then I never had a treated room. That was another big thing.
Yeah.
For mixing specifically, it's like tracking is just like I kind of like wild card spaces, because in that journey, like I tracked in so many different rooms. Like I tracked in a where we used to practice in Old Black was it was all tile and concrete. The room was very lively, very bright, but it sounded really cool. And I actually pulled up one of those old sessions. I was like, these drums actually sound great, And then like and then I remember when we were doing that, my buddy Mitch had a bunch of like really cool obscure microphones that he let me use. I had a giant PV live sound mixer where I could actually like EQ some mics and things going in, but like I was also mixing in that same room. So like the mixes were, they were what they were. So then like that was a big piece. I was like, okay, so if I run something through this piece of gear, it starts coloring the sound and giving that sound life. And then those tolerance differences, because most consumer electronics are built with parts that have a plus or minus 5% tolerance, or capacitors plus or minus 10%. So channel 1 and channel 2 inherently are going to sound slightly different.
Yeah.
So then I was like, oh man, that makes a big difference. So then I was like off the radar watching a ton of Produce Like a Pro, mainly just interviews with all these engineers, and they're talking about, making records and gear. And then so then I picked up an Allen & Heath System 8, and I had a Tangent console, which the first short hair domestics was the first one I tracked through that Tangent console, and it was all fixed point EQs. Like the high end was fixed, the mid range was fixed, and the bass was fixed. So I tracked everything through that. I had a Focusrite, the 18i20, had that, and then was tracking through the console. I was like, okay, cool. So then now I'm actually like hearing stuff. I had a couple outboard compressors, nothing crazy, just DBX like the 266 or 166, nothing fancy. And then I was starting to hear, I was just like, okay, here I'm starting to hear how those pieces of gear are starting to interact. So then fast forward to when I was doing the Earth Radio, had this collection of gear. I was like, I'm itching to try out. So we're going through all this stuff. I didn't track anything through that Allen & Heath. I picked up this All-Tech auto mixer, which is transformer coupled, fixed gain. It was very loud, so it saturated quickly. But then I realized, I was like, oh man, a saturated sound sits better than an unsaturated sound, even if it's just a little bit, because when it comes into the mix, that tone just sits. And then like I've gotten to the point now where it's like I will favor saturation over equalization most times, where it's like this frequency is not sitting right, and it's like if I bring it up, I was like, it's too abrasive. But it's like if I push a little bit harder into something, then it'll excite the harmonics from be the transformer, the electronics. Bass,
bass is huge. That's why I think in like extreme music, that's why a lot of I never got the distortion on bass before. Like I never really understood it, but then when you start understanding what you're talking about, then you're like, okay, now it makes sense because now it's getting them harmonics out of the bass and it's sitting where it needs to in that mix, you know. For the lack of better, like unless you're just trying to make a bunch of fucking racket and crank the distortion, because there's those bands out there too, you know what I mean?
Yeah, with bass is, I love bass. I have like my, you know, over time you start developing like your favorites. Like for bass, I typically 99.99% of the time I always capture 3 tones with bass. I capture the DI, then I capture a clean bass sound, and I capture a distortion bass sound because you need the clarity for the low end and then the clank on the high end. And a Marshall tone stack always to me fits the clank because then I can bring up the mid range that on heavy guitar is less pleasing. When I duck those out, then that's the frequencies on the bass that always make it poke through. Like the latest Meshuggah record, I was losing my shit over. I'm like, this sounds so good. The bass was up in the mix. I like the bass higher in the mix, but you can hear the clank and the rattle just like poke right through. Like my brother's record, Funeral Language, like, I mean, it's my brother's right hand on the bass, and it's just like, the way that bass sits in the mix is awesome. It's Ampeg SVT, Marshall, done. Those are the 2 of them together. It's like you mix those together, and then if I need it, you know, like with like heavy records, I will keep the on the kick the transient super tight so the low end doesn't muddy, and I can leave that space for the bass to take that up. You know, and like I'm gonna even high pass kick drum up to like 65 hertz because it's like that low end from the bass is going to fill all of that out. And then Decapitator is one of my favorites. There's a setting on that where you can do, if you do, it's the thump switch and then the high pass filter, and whatever that high pass filter is, the thump creates a bump right there, and I found that's a really great way to bring up the low end. So it's like depending on the frequency of the kick, if it's sitting at like, let's say it's like 55 hertz or something like that, I'll high pass it up to there, give it that thump, and all of a sudden my subwoofer is just like tickling me, you know? And that's another adventure I went through. So it's like, let's rewind. I get sidetracked so fast, you know? So it's like, so I'm recording all this shit through all this gear, seeing how it impacts stuff. Then I moved all of my equipment to Paul's house, and I made a bunch of records at his place, still learning this stuff. I had the Allen and Heath. And then I was fortunate enough to get this TAC Scorpion console from Rick Johnson, and I got an awesome deal from that. He bought a new console to him on AMEC console. He's just like, hey, the master bus on this is not working for me. He's just like, would you be willing to repair this, and I will pay you by giving you this console? And I was like, yeah, done.
You got it.
So then I got this TAC console. And the first thing I did was, the beautiful thing on this was like every channel is removable, so I can pull a channel out, repair it, drop it back in.
Nice.
So then I got this thing, and the very first record I did was through that console was the very first Funeral Noise record. I had all the op amps upgraded on there. I didn't bypass the capacitors yet. Still had the Focusrite converters. So I had that TAC, and I was like, that was a game changer. And then I put in the master bus, Rick just had this thing. He's just like, oh, yeah. He's like, I forgot to give this thing to you. It's there's a company called Cappy, which they make API gear. Like this guy had an API console, and he needed stuff for replacement parts, so he started this company. So it's an ACA summing booster, and basically it works in between your master fader. So you have, to set the gain right. So there's a unity amp, and then once it goes through the fader, you're going to get signal loss. So you need a makeup amp to make up for that signal loss. So it goes through a pair of 2520 op amps. The transformers goes into the fader, into another pair of 2520 op amps, into another set of transformers, and the output's transformer coupled. So getting that, it was like my sound went from like this to like this. And I was just like, holy shit, discrete op amps. I get it now. I get why people love tracking through Neves, APIs. Like the sound went from like even a mono source, like going from this to this. I was like, the mono sounds huge. I was like, holy shit. So then moved everything to my house. When we did the record Embolism, I wanted to be able to have time to record vocals on my own creative schedule, because I found it challenging. It's like Paul lives in Norton Shores. It's like, all right, I'm scheduling this time. Be creative. And I hate that. It's like I have time set aside to be creative, and I was like, I want to be able to just kind of like chip away at this. And so I finished recording all the vocals, mixed that record on the console, and used a ton of outboard gear for that one. And which was kind of nice because I didn't have any other records, so I could just leave everything up on the board. And I've since moved away from that, but I'll get to that in my progression. Mixed everything through that. Records out. We had Mario Quintero from Spotlight's master the record. And so then COVID hit, and so I had a little extra cash. So I built out my basement. I was like, I need a good tracking room. So I bought a bunch of wood. I went after working at Avdec's parents. They were in a log cabin, so there was a ton of wood. So I was like, okay, I know I want a ton of wood down here. It's all poplar, except for one wall, which is cherry and maple. But the thing I found with that is like poplar is really soft in the high end, and it's not bitey or like trashy sounding. So I built that up, ran my snake down, and then at that time I was working for GE doing electronics out there, which was great for me because it rounded out a lot of my electronics knowledge to where like I just had gaps. Like I know this does this, I know this does this, and I was fortunate enough to have a really great mentor out there that like he taught me so much to where I was like, I'd be talking to him about this piece of gear. I'd like bring stuff in, show it to him. I was like, hey, this is the thing I'm working on. I was like, why does this sound so cool? And I learned a ton about Transformers. There's a guy out there who was obsessed with Transformers. So we would talk about that. And he's like, I don't know about for audio, but he's like, this might explain why you like that sound. I was like, okay. So then I talked to my wife and I was like, hey, I really need to upgrade my converter. So I got the Antelope Orion 32 HD. And that right there was the biggest game changer of my life. I remember I hooked it up, and Tara was sitting on the couch in the bedroom, which is where I mix. And I was like, pick a song. So we pulled up Taylor Swift, and she's like, wow, that sounds really clear. And I'm like, yeah, it does. So the first band I recorded with those converters, my console, all that was American Cheese. And what I was doing at that time is I would audition a mix. Like you have a running mix that you keep in the box while you're tracking. And then when it's like showtime to me, it's like, all right, well, let's audition it on the console. So I brought everything out to the console just at Unity. I run everything at 0. What I was doing then is like I would just level match everything, drive the preamps a little bit, bring all the faders up so that if at that time I had a couple sessions going where it's like, okay, if I bring everything to 0, and the gain on everything to noon, then I don't have to change anything. So then I would make all my heavy decisions at the box and only using the board for color. Brought all their stuff up, broke everything else. So I did it in stem. So I'd have a stereo drum, bass, stereo guitar, stereo vocal. Then I'd have a reverb and like what I call, effects and stuff. And I'd just break it all out. And I listened to it and I was like, this sounds terrible. It was muddy. It was dark. The transients were squishy. And I was like, oh. So then I was like, why? So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to bypass these capacitors. I remember reading in a forum about Jim Williams talking about, like, if you really want your console to sound musical, bypass these capacitors. And the caveat to that is op amps will amplify anything that's in there, be it AC or DC. So when you get higher performing op amps, you get there's what's called a DC offset, to where DC, if there's any DC on the input, that op amp will amplify that and translate DC through that. And DC is counterproductive to circuit functionality. So I was like, all right, I'm going to bypass these caps. I picked 2 channels. I bypassed the capacitors in there. I pulled my oscilloscope up. I checked the DC offset. The DC was so low. I was like, fuck it. I'm going to let it ride. So I recorded their music through a stereo channel without the capacitors, or with the capacitors in place, bypassed and recorded the same thing. And I was like, oh, wow, top end opened up, snappier sounding, super clear sounding. So I was like, all right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I bypassed the caps on every single channel. And I was like, holy shit. And I think I actually did mix their record through that. Yeah, I did. And another big piece for me that was like an aha moment was when I was mixing Embolism. I did a barter with a guy. He got my old System 8. I traded in my old console for a banjo because I really wanted a banjo. And he came back. He's like, hey, you remember all those mods you were talking about doing to this board? I was like, yeah. He's like, I want to do that. I was like, okay. I was like, would you be willing to trade? I was like, I really want to get this successor bus compressor by Heritage Audio. He's like, all right, I'll trade you. I was like, I'll buy you that compressor if you mod my board. And that was a huge undertaking. It took me about 6 or 7 months to mod that thing. But when it was done, like, he came to pick it up, and I looked at him. He's just like, you don't want to get rid of it now, do you? I was like, it sounds really good. And so I'd never worked with a bus compressor before. I'd never had anything on my 2-bus. I always just mixed out into the open.
Yeah.
And so when I put that bus compressor on, I was just, kind of figuring it out. And I was like, all of a sudden, that familiarity of like all the records we grew up listening, that glue that happened, I was like, oh, I get it. I understand now, like mixing into compression. I'd never done that before. And that was like an aha moment. And when I mixed, the embolism record, I mixed everything on the board, and then I had the compressor strapped in on the 2-bus. And it was just like, holy shit, like the way the snare drum sat down, the guitars kind of came out a little bit, everything, like the vocals just kind of tucked. And then that compressor has transformers. And then I learned this when I was working on Vin's record. The funeral language was, on my board, I monitor everything. I have a return track on my console, and then I send out the return into the 2-bus, and then when I bounce a mix, I actually record it back into the session, so I'm getting the sound of that master bus. And when I was messing with his mix, I had on my output of Reaper, at that time I was using the SPL Iron because I liked the way the gain amps sounded on that one a lot. And so if I turned it up, all of a sudden it was just like the image, the sides opened up, the harmonics on the guitar started to come out, the center image started to tuck a little bit more, and I found this sweet spot. I was super stoned when I was doing this, and so it's kind of funny where I was just like, I was fucking with this thing, and I was just like, I remember texting my brother, I was like, I feel like the console revealed itself to me. Like, I finally learned what this thing sounded like. And so then, and then I also, when I was doing the basement, I treated my room. My buddy Joe, who I traded the System 8 to, he was obsessed with like sound trim. He's like, okay, he's like, you gotta do this, 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 and he's like, he subscribed to this this guy that had like all this stuff figured out. He's like, this is how you do the calculations. So I went through, I measured my room out, I measured my mix position, put everything into place. I have a giant cloud above my console to absorb reflections. I've got the bass traps in the corner. I've got diffusion behind my head. I've got the first reflection points on my ears tapped. And it's like, as soon as I did that, like, I feel like the proof is in the pudding. That first American Cheese record I did versus the one I did before that was Tiny Tree's Embolism. You hear that, upgraded converters, treated room. All of a sudden it was like, boom. And one of the biggest things that for me was like, when I got those, getting these converters, like everything was so clear. And I was doing less. I was just like, oh, that sounds good. I'm just gonna leave it alone. Oh, that sounds good. I'm just gonna leave it alone.
Yeah.
I found myself shying away from the plug-in black hole of like, okay, I put this on here. Now I need this. Oh, it needs this now. Now it needs this. Now it needs this. And like, that's what I got into on this record right here. I went down this rabbit hole of doing too much. And I remember I was like, this mix sounds like absolute dog shit to me.
I was going to ask you that too, because I feel like you can get into that too, because there's so much to know. There's so much to learn. Obviously, just listening to you talk,
yeah.
Right? There's so many things that to it. Like sometimes my approach might be the more less is more type thing.
Sure.
Like, let it fucking ride. And if it sounds good, it sounds good, because
yes.
knowing all what you know is valuable.
Yeah.
But you can also get a good mix not knowing everything that you know and not having all that gear as well. You know what I mean? So sometimes for me, it's like less can be more, because you can add 19 plugins to the bass and like, oh, this sounds more like shit than just the dry, the dry signal. Like you done fucked yourself because you did all this extra shit and you didn't even really need to do all that. And it's like, all right, take all that off. Let's back it up and then let's go back. You know?
The biggest thing that, like, the takeaway, the thing that was the one thing I've learned is, like, I'll every once in a while I'll get a session to where I'll mix something that someone else has tracked. And like Vin, so we recorded, so he programmed all the drums, and then we tracked all the bass and guitar at my house. Then he went back to his house and tracked his vocals, and he had an SM7 into a Focusrite, and he used the mic pre and the Focusrite. And he sent the vocals back, and I was like, I said the vocal tracking, I was like, they sound terrible. Like, hearing a vocal mic or any microphone through a good preamp, that was the other thing I learned with analog gear is like, when you plug into a good mic pre, 99% of the problems disappear. That was just like, holy shit. Even plugging into like when I had that old PV mixer, even plugging into that is just like all these little things like the overtones in a kick drum or all these little nuances, the way the high end sits or something. It's just like all of a sudden that stuff just kind of like disappears. And that's what really kind of like was a tipping point for me being like, I got a mic pre is crucial.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you know? And then, so like when I got his vocals, I actually sent the vocals out back through my console and recorded all of the vocals back in. And then even Vin was just like, holy shit, those vocals have so much more body. It's just that all that little stuff that happens by actually going through, electronics and transformers, like getting that sound where it's just like, that helps. And so like, getting back to this, so it's like, when I got to the point where I'm like, this sounds stupid, I took all the plugins off and I listened to the raw track sounds. I was like, this is way better. So what I did is I started the record mixing from scratch. I pulled everything out. I bounced all the tracks out. I pulled up a new session. I mixed the whole record with API console strips. And I was just like, there we go. And it's like just right there.
Go ahead, Nick.
I was just gonna say that entire production workshop there, that sounded like so much my head. I can only go into like demoing my own stuff. And laughing but very seriously. Like, just, can I get the idea of it captured? And the whole time I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh my God, this is why I can't. This is why it's like, this is why it's Field of Dreams for me. I can't cross that line. I can only stay over here in my corner, in my safe bubble of being content creation.
Yeah.
I can do writing. I can collaborate with you very easily. It's so much fun for me. Oh, you've done almost all the legwork, like I just step in and build off of what. So when you start talking about all of this stuff, like my brain is just slowly melting. I'm like, oh, that's like, I have to listen to this again, and I have to write down 20 things I need to learn if I ever want to step outside of just capturing my own idea and say, hey, I don't aspire to become a producer. But I understand that there's something to be said for all of it, because I know I like a good produced album. I know the difference between, well, that sounds kind of raw, like you did that like in your basement, versus you spent time in a professional studio and it sounds crystal clear, And so it takes a guy like you to do all of that work,
all that nerd shit,
all of that work, and then for me to, and Jay too, for me to just like kind of stand on that and say, and when you said less is more, and I was like, he just preached one of my ethos, like that is my whole mantra, less is more, especially as a bassist, right?
Yeah,
because I compete with Jay on riffs. But then when you sit down and you record, you're like, you need to like strip that back a lot.
Yeah.
Strip your bass line down a lot.
Yep.
In the studio here and now, almost rewrite it. We'll have an accent here, and we'll do different highlights on your part here. But like, it's a lot. I need to have it simplified for me. I need to be able to make it like really simple that I can understand. And I don't want to do all of these knob turning things and all this fading. And I'm like, I can. But it feels like it's so much time in my life. Where am I going to carve it out to learn all of that? Like, it's taken you a decade or more, like 20 years or more. You've been recording, and probably same for you. Like, just been doing it forever. And I'm like, God help me. Thank God I know these guys, or I don't have to like do this shit. Because
there's also levels to this shit. Like, he's naming all these different things, and it's like you only know it if you read up on it. No, because some of the stuff I don't even really know, like the capacitors and all that, because I don't have that kind of board, So if you start dealing with like the analog gear and the outboard gear, and like I said, there's levels to this shit. You can get deep, and this dude's at the fucking bottom of the ocean, like unexplored territory.
Electronics is my shit.
I couldn't even like. I got to figure out why fucking my amp sounds like shit. I think I need to change the tubes. Like, that's where I'm at with like the electronic shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so,
that's actually, I was thinking this is the perfect caveat. I've started uploading videos to YouTube where I go through, this is the raw track sound, to this is what I'm doing, and this is where it is ending up.
Right.
So that people can see, it's just like, okay, this is what, because that was a big, the other thing that was like a big eye-opening thing, hearing drum samples.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was like, that made me better at tracking drums. I was like, I love the way this sample sounds. So I was like, okay, if I love the way this sample sounds, then I need to find the right concoction of microphones and mic position to arrive at that sound. That was like, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was a big, aha moment. I was like, these samples sound great, but they're recording samples through good mic pre's, good
Oh,
mics,
yeah. Great rooms, trying a bunch of different drums, they got, and years of experience also too. There's nothing you can do to replace that and all the knowledge that you can learn. But well, I want to wrap this thing up here soon, man. Is there anything that you want people to know? I mean, you got Analog Time Machine. Now you're open all the time. You booking out. I mean, what does that look like? What do you want to promote? I know you got the YouTube channel. I just seen that thing that you want to build that a little bit. So
I do.
Talk about what you want people to know about you, where they can find you, and really what you got going on, brother.
I'm in a big life shift for myself, trying to slip away from the 9 to 5. And I've been fortunate enough to where I've done 11 records this year, and I've got 2 more on the books, and I still am booking for November, December right now. Depends on when this is coming out.
It'll be October-ish, November, because we stack them up. So,
okay, so I may still be open then, but I am putting time and effort into my YouTube. I'm trying to build that up, hit those thresholds where I can start monetizing that so I can have another revenue stream. I'm also diving back into, I have a bunch of circuits that I'm designing that I'm going to be bringing to market, which I'll be putting through Analog Time Machine. So I'm going to start building up some pedals, some studio gear that I'll be bringing to market. So, keep your eyes peeled on that. Running the studio, I'm available for tracking. I love tracking, mixing. I actually detest mastering, so don't hit me up for mastering. There's mastering engineers. It's like, let mastering engineers do their job.
Thing. Yeah, I agree. It's a bitch, man.
It's can I do it myself? I'm too close to it in the mix. Where it's like you send it to someone new. It's like they have all the gear that's designed for mastering. They have the ear. That's all they do. It's like you hire the plumber because the plumber knows how to fix plumbing.
Right.
It's like the right person for the job. And I have, come to find my favorite mastering engineers where I hear the final, I'm like, oh shit, that sounds awesome. And that's also made me a better mixer too, is like hearing how things happen going to a mastering engineer of like how to set things in the mix. So yeah, my YouTube, it's Addison Eilers is the youtube.com/Addison Eilers, or you can search Analog Time Machine. My Instagram is @Analog Time Machine. My Facebook is it's Analog Time Machine. And so those are the big things right there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thanks a lot for coming over and being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on,
man.
Yeah.
It's been cool to see you again, and
likewise,
catch up, and we'll have to do it some more. I'd love to come over and see what you got.
I'd love to have you. Oh man, it'd be so much fun.
Learn some shit, hang out, and fucking, give hugs. And
before I let you go,
tell
us what you're listening to right now. Something heavy and something mellow.
Oh man,
besides the shit you got to mix all day.
right. Not the stuff you're working on. The stuff you actually take time away from all of that and just enjoy listening to music.
Right now, I've been listening.
Older. Go ahead.
I've been listening to recently Dream Decay, the album You, which is Y with the U with I think a tilde over it or something like that. That's a really cool record. I listened to a ton of Life and Times. And Black Foxes, their first record is my favorite. Heavy shit. I really like Fuming Mouth. I love that HM2 sound. Been listening to, and Turbid North. They have a record. Actually, they have a couple records. I really like Turbid North. I've been listening to them quite a bit lately. What are the heavy shit I've been listening to? Probably Turbid North is like they're really checking a lot of boxes for me. Where like the way they marry like super heavy shit with mellow shit's really cool. Nice. I like it a lot.
Something for us to check out.
Yeah, this is how I find out new music. I have to ask people because I have my sources, and then I'm only going to get a couple of things that I like out of all of that. And then I got to have somebody like you come along and say, hey, this is what I'm listening to if you're like heavy, and I'll just go with that. And the mellow stuff too. I always need something to do, like just chill out to and vibe. So I'd like to get that out of the guests from now on too. Is just like, what are you listening to?
Dude, side note, because of Paul, the band Shiner, never heard of him, started hanging out with Paul, and he was like, oh yeah, you should listen to Shiner. Now I'm basically obsessed with Shiner and Life and Times, which is fronted by the guy named Alan Epley, which this man, I have never had somebody where I really looked up to as a musician and artist, but for the first time I'm like, everything he does is fantastic to me. So basically our next Tiny Tree record is me wanting to be like Shiner. It's just, you know how like the shit you listen to naturally finds its way into your music?
Oh yeah.
Where it's just like I love this man's work. He just released a solo record, which is outstanding. But Life and Times, their one record that's like a map, is probably my favorite one of theirs. But I've been listening to a ton of that, and I love the production on it. It's really cool. Oh yeah, so that's a big one. And then like this Dream Decay record is actually really sick too. So that's how I learned about music. You learn about it through the podcast. Like when bands come through, it's like they're like, oh man, like we love this record. Like when I was doing American Cheese, they were like, we love the band 4 Years Strong. Never listened to the band a day in my life. And they're like, we want to sound like this record. And I was like, okay, who produced the record? Who mastered the record? I was like, okay, Kurt Ballou. I have a Kurt Ballou sample pack. So I was like, if we need to, we can pull from that. I was like, they sent it to Brad Boatwright Audio Siege, so they had their record mastered by him. I was like, well, let's send it to all the right people to recreate that sound. And then 4 Years Strong, another great band. Like I was like, these guys are great. Their record, I think it's Brain Pain. Will Putney did that record. Really, really great record.
He's a badass.
Yeah.
Will Putney, huge name.
But all right, man. Well, thanks a lot for coming on the pod.
Thanks,
dude.
man.
I appreciate it. We'll have you on again, and we'll talk more in the future, man.
Rock and
Much
roll.
love to you.
Awesome.
Keep it metal.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Addison.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Peace.